James and I have talked a good amount about our psychic level kind of experiences. And you may think when you're watching that, like, this is not what psychic is. This isn't that state realm. Well, maybe you're right. I don't know. But in my opinion, that we're talking about exactly the psychic state. We're talking about the transcendence of self, the radical acceptance of all conditions. We're talking about disconnecting, disidentifying with the personal narrative and story and attachments. That's what this is. A feeling of bliss, unbelievable bliss and freedom in the present moment. I like to think of it's like this urgency, like, no, really, now, this is happening. I'm serious. It doesn't matter what you do. That's fine. I'm not putting pressure on you. I'm just saying, like, get jazzed. This is it. This is life. This is the life you get. This is your time. This is all there is, and it's now, and it's happening. So go. It's urgent in an exciting sense. It's not a pressure thing, but it's like having someone rooting for you. It's like the universe wants you. It wants you to do this. It wants you to wake up. It wants you to wake up other people. And that's exciting and fun, even though a lot of stuff in our life doesn't seem that way. And similarly, you may be disappointed that both James and I, we fell out of our states. We fell out of our practice. I fell out of my practice. And in the case of James and I, it may be disappointing for you, or you may feel like it hurts our credibility that James had this astounding state and then it fell away. And it's now just, it's a teacher to him. He uses it as, part of his personal story, part of his ego. It's helped to make him a better person. That's what most of us get out of these. That's what I get out of these. And then we talked about my practice it's more a level problem. I was able to access states pretty regularly, but I was not able to make it a permanent trait. I fell into a different lifestyle. You kind of have to keep a lot of things spinning when you're coming from ego, trying to get into psyche, and I was unable to do that. These days, I meditate here and there, but I do not have a consistent daily 1-hour meditation practice. I'm not consistently free of inebriance entirely. You know what I mean? These are all conditions that have to be in place in order for me, in my experience, to have a successful meditation practice or a spiritual practice that's bearing fruit over time. It really takes a lot of time and a lot of things that I consider luxuries at this time with the goals that I have. Now, I could go, put a sack over my shoulder and go out into the wilderness. Like, I just don't think I really need to do that. I would rather participate in the marketplace as Gautama Buddha did, figure that all out, figure out the people thing, fit in first and foremost. When I feel like I'm still kind of childish there, so I need to do more work there, because I've been so focused on states this whole time. I've been shooting for the moon, but I have a lot of development to do in sort of the middle zone, the sort of like amber orange stuff. I have a lot of work to do there. I feel like it's more appropriate as an integral type of person to do that sort of work first, and then have the long-term goal be to commit myself to a path that's now feasible, that's now reasonable, where I'm not inconveniencing anyone else, where I don't have to beg other people for things. I'm totally open to criticism of that. But I do have a practice now. It is not to say that I don't have a practice and that it bears no fruit. That would be wrong. I do still do yoga. I do meditate pretty regularly, and I'm always engaging with spiritual people and trying to embody at all times, try to remember, try to see through the appropriate structure of remembering that I'm not attached to all this, that I don't need for anything to come out any particular way. Many of us, it seems, are prone to codependency, and that's a form of attachment, a very severe form of attachment, which may be a relationships thing, like romantic, or it may be a friendships thing, or it may be in relation to your career, in relation to your aspirations, that you fall in love with tasks and then fall out of love with tasks, or they fall out of love with you, or they're disappointing, whatever the codependent thing manifests as in your case. I'm just, I got a little hunch I'm working on here. There is a connection between the codependent, passionate type. There's different types of codependent types, but the me type, you recognize me. I'm not a traumatized victim, beggar, addict, who needs someone to love them. Obviously, that's a codependent type. One of them, one of many. I am a type who gets excited and feels like everything's resolved prematurely and jumps too deeply into things and gets really, really committed to them in a way that's not sustainable and then burns out. And then I hate myself for failing to live up to that. That's how I do codependency. And that applies to my career, to my musicianship, to my art, to Unthink Me, to my friendships, to my love life. I mean, and what I'm saying today is it applies to my spiritual practice. I had some really deep states due to a really committed practice. So everything I have to say about it now, I know is worthless because I'm seeing it from this egoic position, because I've regressed, because I'm codependent. And I'm saying that's okay, guys. Like, we're all in you're not the enlightened master, or if you are, hit me up. We're all somewhere on the spectrum with various lines. For me, one of the most important things about this sort of dialogue is that we don't have to sell ourselves. We don't have to be a shape or a package. You can just come as you are. Just be yourself. You don't have to avoid spiritual situations, intellectual conversations, vulnerability, because you feel underqualified, because you feel like that doesn't apply to you, like that's not for you. It is for you. It's for us. What I'm saying is, it's okay to not be at the highest, to be really interested in enlightenment and not be enlightened, to be a seeker. That's okay. No big deal. I would almost say just, go a little easier on yourself, to be having these conversations at the second tier is quite a gift and quite a pleasure. It's my pleasure. This is the most fun I've ever had in my life. Not even joking about that. I know it sounds fake or something. But I think that you're actually starting to get into that transcendent place when you do appreciate where you're at now and you do love yourself in spite of your flaws, and you are fearless about sharing that with other people because you trust that this is a benevolent universe with benevolent sentient beings. And if you can be real with them, you can expect that some of them will give back what you've given them. Some of them. And as you experiment with this, you'll figure out who they are and how to identify them. This, as far as I know, is the way out of codependency. You do have to be a little harsh about it sometimes. Don't be harsh to yourself. Just work hard. Work hard. Have fun working. Whistle while you work. Don't be harsh to others either. They're on their own path. They don't have the same standards as you. They don't have the same rules as you. Don't be mad. Don't be mad. They know not what they do. They know not what they do. So don't be mad. I'm on your side. If you're a good one. If you're interested in vulnerability, sharing the truth, your true nature, your weird, flawed nature. This is to see the psyche in its totality, isn't it? This is what we're talking about. This is a psychic state. It's not dark. It's dark when it's in shadow. When you shine light on it, it's, you ever really, really look at a spider? They get less and less scary the more you really just look at them, because they are actually just cute. They're just little cuties. Of course you're scared of them because there's some small percentage of them, maybe where you live it's higher, that can bite you and that can kill you. Could give you a little bump. Could be in your cereal and you could almost eat one. Could go in your mouth. It could bite your tongue. So you hate it and you think that its physical form is creepy, but it isn't. It's a beautiful, beautiful creature. It's not, that's not random. It's key. Remember James looking at a dragonfly and seeing that if I'm that dragonfly, I make this funny little face when I'm cleaning up right at you. That means something to both of us. It's a little joke. Or it's a gross bug trying to bite me. Levels. All of this is to say, I'm telling you, I think that everything we've done in this States of Consciousness series is right on the money. I was worried, but I think it's right on the money. If we're really solid on the pre-trans fallacy, and we're really solid on states and stages, if that is a shared reality between us, then it is fair for us to call this whole realm indigo. That's fine. I don't mind. You could be red meme and, it's indigo, right? Yeah, sure. Easy. It's not exact. It's It's not, because that's supposed to be a level, not a state. But it is the level of the state. You know, it's I'm being rational right now versus like I'm a rational guy. I'm having an awakening experience right now versus I'm awakened. These are confused so much. It's like a universally mistaken thing. So just watching the flow on the Unthink Me channel, you know, crunching the numbers, I feel like this is where we ought to be talking right now. This is what people are interested in. Other videos about levels don't usually get up here. Sometimes they do, and then those have their own kind of weirdnesses. But a lot of people out there talking about spiral dynamics and levels, they don't really go up here into this transcendent stuff because a lot of the lore on levels, I love it. Second tier. It's awesome. I'm glad that's out there. I'm glad that's happening. But it's not, it's kind of just lumping this, okay, there's this like choral stage and it goes into enlightening stuff. And it's not really hashed out because it's not the concern. It's not what you're looking at. That's fine. You can crunch levels together. I would like to crunch some of them together and I'd like to expand some of them out. Sure, everybody has different lines in their measuring stick. Some people need hundredths of a meter, you know, hundredths of a centimeter. Some people need hundredths of a millimeter, you know. You need finer scales for different things. I'm liking the third tier concept. I'm liking psychic, subtle, causal, non-dual. And I feel like this is what everybody kind of wants to know. If you already have been through psychic, you're probably not looking for information about this. If you're like indigo or beyond, you're probably not watching my videos to get information about states. That's not really, maybe as like a primer or a refresher or to see like how integral checks in, but you probably have a pretty elaborate and sophisticated understanding of like where you're at and where you need to go. So this is more for people who are just asking questions about like what is transcendent spirituality? What are states of consciousness? What does meditation do? What is the path? Where does it lead? And so these are 4 broad categories across cultures, across traditions, across like anything that's like a spiritual practice to develop your consciousness into transcendence is going to have this like psychic, subtle, causal, non-dual kind of pattern to it. We can talk about this because integral theory enables that. And we can talk about it a little bit because we've had a little bit of experience with it. That's about where we're at. And we'd love to talk with people from different experiences and different practices and traditions. We would love to do that. I'm going to smash together like 47 different like ideologies and religions. That's what integral is. I'm going to try my best, you know. These 4 realms, right, are kind of, let's kind of get into that a little bit. So right now we have our mind, our thinking ego mind, and our 5 senses or 27 senses, whatever you want. Experiencing sensory reality, thinking, talking. This is called the gross realm. This is what we know. This is where ego happens. This is the marketplace, the gross realm. Spirituality generally will take you out of the gross realm with consciousness, with conscious awareness. And we don't even know what that means, most of us, right? We're persona with an ego around it. We don't know that there's 2 more like layers to this thing that you can be completely conscious of, just like you're conscious of ego and personality, all right? And so the psychic is thus the gateway into spirituality in every practice, in every tradition. So this is what's fascinating. This is what we want to know. What is waking up? But please understand that that's not the end of the path. That's the start of the path. That is not enlightenment. That is the realization that this is an illusion and we need enlightenment. We need to be free of it. Start of that. Very important, very big contribution. The non-dual and the causal are in many traditions not cut apart and are cut apart in ways that can be confusing. That's very confusing, all right? Causal and non-dual, right? If we're talking about the gross realm and the gross experience, and then the psychic and the subtle as the sort of subtle realm experience, the causal and the non-dual as a sort of causal level, you know, experience. We can kind of break it into 3. We have sort of this gross realm, which is where we are now. Ego, beta brainwaves, alpha brainwaves, waking consciousness. This is the gross realm. Physical senses, personalities interacting, egos interacting. If you drop your sensory body mind or stop processing information into this configuration that we're experiencing now, if you just stop doing that, you'll dream, essentially. You'll have vision. Because your mind always creates, always produces. It runs, it's generating. And if you just stop feeling the need to construct these things, this me, this story, if you just stop doing that, it's a huge ask, you'll notice that the mind doesn't stop. The mind is still there. The psyche is still happening. And you'll be able to see it directly. This is the subtle, the mind level without, if you take the part of reality, which is the gross realm, and take everything else, that's pretty much the subtle. The subtle is the mind. It is the upper left quadrant. Whereas the gross realm is sort of a metaphor because we don't actually experience the atomic matter around us. We're imagining them into being by processing sensory information into things that make sense to us at our scale with our story. The subtle is the level of mind and psyche. In the subtle, when you're dreaming, you're experiencing pure subtle, just mind. You know, when you dream, you're not really aware of your body. You're not really aware of, you're sort of out of the flow of your day-to-day life. And there's just sort of patterns coming at you that you're now interpreting into this like beautiful vision, this tapestry. That's pure subtle. And most of us are not conscious during our dreams, so we're not in the subtle. It's just the subtle is there. Sometimes we'll kind of notice things. Sometimes we'll remember some things. We may have lucid dreams. We may have various phenomena that are kind of on the gateway of being subtle phenomena. But as a mystic, so that's the subtle realm. It's the mind. And we're in it right now, but we're also in the gross realm too. So we're sort of in this layered, gross, subtle, and we can't really see the difference between them very clearly because this is just, has always been the given. This has been the reality we've known. This is the way to assemble reality that we've all been taught. So you need another teacher, or you have to be super smart or something, or just try really hard in order to break out of everything you've been taught. I want to make an analogy right now. Learning Japanese, the language Japanese, is super, super easy. Any child can do it. They do it all the time. They pretty much have it mastered by like 4 years old, and a lot of that they're incapable. So, it takes about 2 years to learn Japanese. For me, it would be impossible to learn Japanese. Could not do it. So what's the problem? It's a maturity problem. It's a discipline problem. I could learn Japanese within 2 years. Are you kidding me? But I would be so embarrassed, and it'd be so difficult to do everything, trying to do everything in Japanese. So I'm going to sneak in and I'm going to keep being English. I'm going to translate everything into English. I'm going to keep thinking in English. But the child doesn't do that. They don't have English. So they just, okay, what's language? Oh, it's Japanese. Okay, I'm talking Japanese now. I only know 5 words. That's what I got. I don't have any other basis. So to get into the transpersonal, the psychic state or higher stages, you sort of have to do the same thing with ego. You have to unlearn this process of putting ego in everywhere, putting your story in everywhere, just like you put English in everywhere. All the words have to be translated. Everything's translated into ego, into atom. Everything, how does it apply to me? What do I get out of it? So I have to unlearn that. And this is why enlightenment is the freaking hardest thing in the world. It's you have to learn a foreign language as an adult with no motive to do so. You get no money out of this. Unless you want to try and be a guru or whatever. Good luck. I don't get any money if I do it. Why would I do it? It's pointless. Well, you're released from everything negative, everything troubling, everything problematic, death, suffering, grief, tragedy, betrayal, free. Didn't happen to me. I read a book about it or something. If you feel sufficiently compelled towards that, you can learn Japanese in 2 years. Absolutely. So we say like the non-dual realization takes maybe like 40 years to master if you can do it in a lifetime, if you're really lucky, if you're really gifted. And I would say for an adult to learn a completely foreign language without any profit motive, without any being forced to do it, it's about equally rare. You know, if you were to become a concert grand pianist, it would take a long time. But you're motivated the whole time by your artistry and the sound of the piano. What if that wasn't there? What if you didn't even have that? It would be pointless. It would seem weird. Like, why the hell would I waste my time in that way? Someone says it's the ultimate bliss, ultimate freedom. I don't care. I feel all right. And that's fine. That's where we are. I'm with you. But I'm not going to lie to myself and pretend that this doesn't exist, because as far as I can see, it does. You can be free of this. And you're the only thing in the way. You just have to cut it out. It's effortless. Aw, I'm sorry, guys. So with those 25 million qualifiers, I think we're almost ready to crack into actual theoretical nuts and bolts now. This is the integral theory. So I've described personality, ego, psyche, consciousness. That's my mini model. That's what you are, the upper left. And it's 4 levels. Just like we did 12 altitudes as 12 levels, it's just 4 levels. In the transcendental talks, ego and personality can be thought of as the same thing. Because remember, these are holons. The ego contains personalities, right? And so you can say, well, it's just an ego. You don't worry about the personality, it's just an ego. That's fine. Just like you can say the psyche contains the ego. It's just a psyche, don't worry. That's fine. In this consideration, we can smash those together. In most human pursuits, knowing the difference between ego and personality is the fundamental essence of understanding the situation. But in this pursuit, in transcendence, that doesn't matter because that's lower stages. Okay, so now we just kind of have 3. We have the ego, the mind, the gross realm. We have the psyche, the total mind, which is the subtle realm. Sambhogya-kaya. We have the nirmanakaya, the causal realm, what I'm calling consciousness. Consciousness is simply the awareness happening right now. That contains your psyche, your archetypes, your content, the connections you've made, your pattern recognition. That contains your ego, the story of your life, your needs and drives and wants, your aspirations for the future, your relationships with people, your credit, all that stuff. And that contains personae, the personality and the shadow, the things that you deny and the things that you reveal, the things that you fake, that you display, that you present in the present moment temporarily. That's a persona. That's an act. We do it all the time. So persona, ego, psyche, consciousness. Consciousness is causal. To recognize consciousness in all 3 states is non-dual. To be present as consciousness in all 3 states is non-dual. Okay. And then so just consciousness alone, the witness, just simply the consciousness itself. So how could I experience that right now? Well, you'd have to get rid of Adam. You'd have to get rid of this environment. You'd have to get rid of my mind. Everything but the consciousness. That's kind of tough, right? Well, try it. What happens? What happens when you try it? Who gets in the way? What happens? Watch that mouse hole. You're gonna get that mouse when it comes out. Just watch it. And what do you think Zen is? That's what it is. That's what it is. Consciousness contains psyche, the subtle. So this is where we can get really confused because we're talking about archetypes. We're not talking about mythology. They end up being the same thing, right? And magical connections, they end up being the same thing. Red meme, all these levels are expressed in a transcendental fashion as well. But we do confuse them. See, the magenta has taken this childish equation of the word with the thing, with the concept, with the spirit. And then through these higher levels, the whole first tier, the second tier, we've split those all apart into different things. We understand them to all be different things so that magical thinking is no longer possible. We know that the concept and the word and the thing and the spirit are all, if they even exist, they're all different things. This is kind of the history of thought has unpacked this for us. But when we're looking at pure psyche, we're actually firsthand, as consciousness, we're seeing those connections that we made as children or that we made at the dawn of civilization. It's the same content, but it's not understood to be reality anymore. It's understood to be our identity. Very strange, right? The ideal subtle realm practice, when I talk about a subtle state, well, you can talk about advanced dream work, lucid dreaming. That is, I actually didn't know this, but that is valid. That is subtle work. That is in the subtle, as long as you're conscious in there. But in terms of entering it from gross, in a meditation or a dance, whatever you do, whatever your practice is, the archetype can be thought of as a mandala in the East. So one of these sort of four-sided patterns, sort of fractally looking patterns. That mandala is associated with a deity, which is sort of like a divine personality, a perfected personality, a force of nature, spirit. And I can understand my psyche, myself, my subtle self, this, me, my psyche, my mind, is a deity in itself. Because what else would a deity be? And I can walk with the pride in the gross realm of knowing that I am an expression of divinity, that I am a god. Not that I can shoot lasers out of my eyes or that I have any power whatsoever. It's not a power god. But it's a god in the sense that spirit has entered the flesh. The cosmic mind has entered matter and is now singing and dancing. That's the miracle, if you can accept that. So I am a deity. You are a deity. We are deities. We're a deity culture. And the more you act like it, the more it's true. The future of our species, in my opinion, is angelic in nature. We become more and more deity-like. And I'm not talking about power in power over people. I'm talking about power over reality, conscious awareness, compassion, the ability to let go. Now here's where we get to the psychic. It sort of helps to do it inside out, I'm sorry. The subtle intersects the gross at the psychic. So there's this bleed over realm, right? That as I experience my body right now, and I don't experience it in dreaming, there must be some realm in between. So as I'm walking out in the woods, I start dreaming, my body starts going away, I become the environment. Nature mysticism, this is the sort of standard psychic practice. I'm experiencing truly transcendence within the gross realm. I'm recognizing myself as the mind as opposed to a mind within nature. It's all one mind. It's just a mind. The whole thing is just a mind. That's psychic. Nature mysticism. Going up into subtle, it gets more into deity mysticism, and generally the body as it's perceived now is not the same or is non-existent in the subtle. So oftentimes what Wilber calls the psychic, he sometimes doesn't even call it that, but because it is sort of entry into subtle, you can really think of it as gross, subtle, causal, and then non-dual is sort of all three, or non-dual is ever present, it's here right now. It is just the embodied nature of consciousness. It never goes away, and that's sort of the recognition that you find the consciousness in its pure essence in the causal and the empty formless nothing, just paying attention. And the real enlightenment realization, the non-dual realization, is that that's always here. That's always here. So you're always free. You're always that. That's my best understanding of it anyway. The psychic is almost itself not a real range. However, indigo, you can spend your whole life in indigo. It's not always a path forward. Coming from the turquoise centaur, the body-mind, but they're still two. They're connected, but they're still two. Integration. Integration's happening in every level. Well, it still isn't really quite transcendent. It sort of has this intuition of transcendence, but it's not having those state experiences yet very much, I would say. So indigo is very associated. Indigo basically is the psychic state as realized as a stage. And so that sense of nature, what we're calling nature mysticism, it can occur in an industrial setting. It can occur in an interpersonal setting. It can occur in any setting. We're just calling it, you can be walking through a city. There isn't anything special about nature that makes nature's mysticism work other than just you're kind of free out there to do whatever you want. And if you feel that way anywhere, that would be like psychic embodiment in every context. If you have to go out to the woods, that means you're not really at indigo. You're at whatever stage you're at in your normal life, and then you go off somewhere to have an indigo state, right? But if you need to live your full life in indigo, then you can't have parameters. You can't go off into the woods. You can't insist on 7 hours a day to practice. It has to be who you are all the time, or most of the time. More often than not, it has to be your fundamental character. Huge difference between states and stages. I apologize for contributing to that misunderstanding. Knowing fully that I was doing it, it's so much easier to use the color names, which are stages, not states. Very scattered discussion. I don't have any outline or anything. I just kind of know what I have to say today. I'm sorry. But the psychic is also very, very important because most people in contemporary culture don't even realize that this is possible. And so when it happens to you, when you have one of these states and you really notice you had this state, it kind of blows your mind, like that this is a potential, this is possible. I would arguably place the psychedelic experience, let's say DMT, I would call that maybe a psychic state. But of course that has parameters, right? You have to take the drug and then it goes away. It's a state. That's how states work. Now, people have made a lot of claims, particularly like heroic doses and stuff, that it goes all the way up to non-dual. I just don't know. We don't have scientists who are aware of any of this stuff. So, like, if they're studying drugs, they're probably not studying states of consciousness. If they're studying states of consciousness, they're probably not studying drugs, et cetera, et cetera. There just isn't a lot of overlap. And of course, none of these people know about integral theory, so they're not going to put it into these words. It's so complicated, and there's really great reasons why we don't have good science on any of this. This is a question that comes up a lot, psychedelics. I feel like they show you the door, to put it in matrix terms. They show you what that state can be like. And I think generally, I've probably gone into, I would say, the subtle. I've had subtle states on psychedelics. It's hard for me to imagine a causal state. Maybe non-dual, but how can you do that? Like, I don't know. So I don't know. I just don't really know. I feel like it would be way easier to do without any inebriants. Way, way, way easier, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. I don't know. But yeah, it definitely, they can, what blows people's minds when they take psychedelics, just a regular amount, is that they do have these psychic states, definitely. They see the contents of their mind displayed in the infinity of reality, and they realize that this is true. This is a truth. This isn't just hallucinating, tripping. In a lot of cases, more kind of like intellectual people will kind of see that, like, my brain is just doing this. I'm just seeing this. This is how reality looks when I'm tripping. Interesting. And so that becomes a gateway. That's like, okay, so could I get there without drugs? Is kind of, I think, the way to appreciate that or interpret that is like you use them as this sort of temporary assist. Oh yeah, now I remember enlightened consciousness. But can I do it without forcing a stop to the ego, without breaking the ego chemically? So that's my thoughts on that. If you want hard science stuff, I would say that the psychic and subtle are very associated with theta brainwaves. Those are sort of a dead giveaway that something resembling psychic and subtle are occurring. Whereas alpha and beta brainwaves are gross realm. So really, in terms of brainwaves, it's like alpha and beta are gross realm, theta is subtle, delta, if that is experienced in deep dreamless sleep, experienced consciously by awareness. In looking at EEG readings of people who have a non-dual realization, that delta frequency will be like happening more in every state throughout the day. So it seems like that delta sort of is consciousness, theta sort of is psyche, alpha and beta sort of are ego and persona. It's funny that they just happen to name the brainwave ranges in a way that corresponds very neatly to state realms of consciousness. But that is just science. It doesn't matter whether you need that or not as like justification. I'm just saying, like, if you're really compelled by brain science stuff, that's a really crude, basic brain science thing which corresponds one-to-one with these notions of four state realms. And speaking again, just briefly on the topic of psychedelics, it's often kind of dichotomized in terms of good and bad trips. Generally, tripping is blissful, but it also exposes you to things that freaking out. It exposes your latent anxiety and fear and insecurity, and it exposes shadow to you. So just like there's good and bad trip, the fundamental trip is bliss. It's good. It's like, wow, cool. But then there's this dark side to it. It's all you. It's all you. It's your bliss and your dark side. So the psychic realm, very similarly, is terrifying because these are all the things you don't want to face. They're all in there with everything else. The things you do want to face, the things you love facing, things that you don't even know you love facing, the deepest, truest parts of yourself, your swan song, your beautiful magnum opus, they're all in there with the dark stuff, with the most terrifying, disgusting, horrible things you can imagine. That's, of course, if you can imagine them, those are in there, in the psyche, in the subtle. So we are exposed to shadow, and I did a video on meditation-induced psychosis. I think this is what's happening. It's exposing that shadow to myself. And as things played out, it became, if you really want to put that under a microscope, it's like my psyche intuited a danger to me, and I responded appropriately by panicking. And it wasn't until a year after that that I came to realize what the danger was, that my psyche was trying to warn me about. Now you can characterize it a lot of different ways. That's fine. This is my understanding of it, and I think it's, in my opinion, that's the way to understand it. So meditation told me, showed me some things that that alarmed me, and I shared them with the person that they were concerned with, and together we sort of decided that they weren't important, and they ended up being very important. And I don't need to make a case for you that dreams and the psyche reveal shadow to you or reveal important things about yourself that you repress. I mean, this is psychology. Read anything by Jung, you'd be great understanding dreams in terms of the deeper contents of the psyche. And of course, Jung was also interested in particularly subtle mysticism, I would say, psychic and subtle mysticism. And very in touch with archetypes, which is the content of the subtle. The Kundalini awakening, I'm not an expert on Kundalini, but there's a sort of embodied serpent, the serpent of mind, which rises from your lower energy centers at the base of your spine, all the way up through your spine, through practices, yoga, it's practices. It sort of shoots out, first through your visionary third eye chakra, then through the crown of your head chakra, then you're in the subtle, because the body's gone now. You're now there's more chakras up here in the subtle, in the deeper practice. But that Kundalini awakening, lots of energies exchange. It can be traumatic for people. It can be very intense. People can be hospitalized. You're not ready to see your shadow. No one's ever ready. We're not brave beings. This is the path. Like, if you want to see everything, you have to see the dark stuff. You have to see shadow. You have to, especially the shadow that pertains specifically to you right now. Particularly, that's the shadow. That's what's important. So let's just kind of go through this one time real quick. You're at turquoise, second tier, stage 8, level 8, and you're a holistic centaur. You're a body mind. You probably have practices. You've kind of maxed out the gross realm. You're kind of winning. And in terms of your own narrative, it doesn't mean you're rich. It doesn't mean you're famous. None of that. That's orange meme stuff. It just means you feel like a successful creature. You feel wholly optimized. You feel integrated. You feel like you're doing, like your soul is in the right place. So we're stage 8 here. We're good. No problem. But we know that there are these higher states. We know that there's these state realms. We're curious. So maybe we start a practice. This holistic centaur, eventually, we leave that sense of the mind-body, the embodiment thing, and we're just no longer embodied, really. We're just kind of mind. It sort of becomes a like subtle identity, or like a pseudo-subtle identity. Wilber talks about psychic bands. And let's talk about the Buddhist terms a little bit. So psychic in that context is usually lower subtle, and then subtle is upper subtle, and then causal is like super subtle, the most subtle, right? And then non-dual is just this fourth state, Turiya Tita, or so causal is Turiya. But it's just the most subtle. So they're basically just saying like subtle until enlightenment. That's what's up. Fine, no problem. But we're calling that lower subtle psychic, where you're still in your body mind, kind of expanding outward into transcendence. And then pure subtle, pure vision, that's what we're calling subtle. And then we're actually making a new category called causal, for pure witness without content of mind, the archetype of the witnessing self. Sorry, let's go back again. Psychic associated with theta brainwaves, transition into the subtle realm. Subtle, characterized again by theta brainwaves. It's like a dream state, can be realized through practices, often deity practices, deity mysticism. In Christianity, it'd be kind of saintly path, something like that. And this is visionary. You're having visions. You're seeing. You're like a prophet, basically. You're getting content from your own psyche, or you could even consider it the collective psyche, because you're tapped into that. You can argue with me, but this doesn't need to be coming from an agency outside of the self. It doesn't need to be coming from a spirit. I believe that to be first tier, unless spirit is simply understood to be this mind, whatever it is, of the universe. Causal is associated with those delta brainwaves, and the non-dual realization throughout all states, also delta brainwaves. So they have these different brainwave patterns. Causal and subtle don't need to be different things. Non-dual is ever present, so it's always happening. There is no not being non-dual, although you don't realize you're non-dual until you've had a pure non-dual state experience. Constant consciousness through waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. I was a little insecure saying this at first, but I've kind of checked it with more recent Wilbur, and I feel like this is correct. Yeah. Simple measuring sticks. Because, right, this is what we do in Unthink Me. We're looking for these, like, everyday sort of ways of understanding these things. A person who is at violet or regular access to subtle as a trait, as a state structure, they will have constant consciousness in the dreaming realm. So when they dream, they're lucid. They're conscious, unless there's some reason why not. But in general, they can access visions and dreams from waking reality, gross realm, whenever they want, pretty much. And every time they dream, they're also still there as consciousness observing. So that's a really simple, just simple, were you present and paying attention the whole time while you were dreaming? Okay, cool, you have subtle. You're subtle as a structure. Now, what level you're at, I'd have to ask tons and tons more questions. If you're actually at the violet level, that would mean that it's what you think, feel, and do. It's your community. It's your infrastructure. That's what that would mean. Again, these can be demarcated in many ways, but I think this is very, very logical to equate them with the brainwave ranges and with what we recognize as the great states of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, right? So going on into causal, this is a thing. I've touched it, so I know it's real. I know this happens, all right? I know you can do this. I'm not an expert at it. I don't have any stability or fluidity in it, but you can be alert, paying attention, conscious in deep dreamless sleep from the waking or from deep dreamless sleep itself. So that stage 12 or non-dual as a permanent trait, assuming you have the structure underneath it, is experienced as constant consciousness all the time. You never stop. You're always here. It feels different, but you're always here. Just like you can wake up and remember some dreams very clearly, you would remember all your dreams and all the time you spent asleep. This might be kind of hard for a lot of people because you really think that when you're asleep, you're not there. You're dead, basically. You don't exist. Because that's what the experience is for you. You're not alert during it. You're not awake. You haven't learned how to do that. It's very tough because you have to stop doing this thing. It takes all your energy away. But it's sort of like seeing the sun go down, like you see this kind of ball of light in the horizon and it's vanishing and then it's totally dark, assuming it's a starless night, right? As a metaphor. This is sort of like you're dreaming, you're lucid, you're having experiences, and then you're just sort of floating. It's like that sun is going down, that dream is going down. It's just floating. And the dream comes back. Here's another dream cycle. And I'm in the subtle. That's sort of what that feels like. Most of us won't have that experience, but most of us can relate to the experience of rolling from waking into dreaming. Those sort of hypnagogic rollovers where like you might come right out of a dream and back, or have a sleep paralysis. So we can kind of understand that type of rolling, but rolling from subtle into causal is a little different. And I want to just point out too, when you're asleep, if someone comes and claps their hands, puts smelling salt in front of you, like slaps you in the face, you're going to wake right up, right? So you're not really asleep. You're not fully asleep. Something's in there paying attention. And you could be that thing. This is kind of what you're doing in that causal state. And if you can keep that thing going forever, then you are non-dual. You live forever. Now. Oh, and guess who came up? Somebody else wanted to do it too. You can't do it without Cody. Let's say, ready? Yeah! Pump it. Pump in the universe. We are animate. Huh, Cody?